The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're proudly coming to you through the ever-expanding X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring gifts of the earth. So, I addressed my teacher one day as he was steeping some bear root for our upcoming sweat lodge. How do you know what herbs to use? I'd noticed he used different herbs from one lodge to the next, and as of yet, I had been unable to ascertain the rhyme or reason of his choices. I ask, he responded. Ask who? I wanted to know. The earth, the stars, the plant helpers, the spirit of the lodge, and the people that will be here. How do you do all of that? I challenged. I knew the man didn't have a phone, and people would just show up for the lodge. We never knew who would be there. Then there was the issue of consulting the earth, the stars, and the plants. As was his way, he elected to say no more. Over the years I studied with him, I learned to enter the shamanic trance, where I too commune with the earth, the stars, the plant helpers. I've come to understand that the ancients originally developed herbology shamanically. Since that time, the information has been mostly passed down verbally from teacher to student. But there's really no substitute for going to the source. Shared or written information is from the past. Every year, the potency of the herbs vary depending on weather, soil, and so on. Every time we treat an illness or hold a ceremony, the stars are in a different position, bathing the earth with varying influences. The needs of each individual or group are not only unique, but change moment to moment. In ancient times, the shaman of the tribe was responsible for connecting with the earth, the stars, in order to create living ceremony using the appropriate herbs for the energies present. Over the years, shamanism has been systematically nearly eradicated from the planet. Without the presence of a trained shaman, there's really no way to take into consideration all the current variables. We can only go through the motions handed down and hope for the best. In ages past, our solar system was moving through a lower frequency area in the galaxy. These darker times limit the connectivity between humans and the spiritual or quantum level of life. Without direct contact to the divine, we're reduced to dogmatic adherence to ritual from the past to perform ceremony and ascertain what herbs best serve. Yet we become so disconnected from the planet and the balance she holds that the subtleties are often wasted on us anyway. Ill health is due to imbalance, separation from our true nature. To regain health, we must embark on our personal sacred path to wholeness, with no two paths being exactly the same. The greater the imbalance, the greater the individual adjustments needed. Though not perfectly aligned with the times, even dogmatic ceremonies can start the process of reconnecting to the earth and all her gifts. The traditional forms of working with herbs offer plenty of support in and of themselves. Many of us may need a more powerful correction, such as surgery or pharmaceuticals, for a time. Reaching a state of balance through natural means does us no good if we die before we get there. Once we've engaged in the healing process, we require increasingly refined and subtle corrections. At that point, it's important to be attuned with the current times in our current ceremonies and treatments. As our solar system is now entering a higher frequency area of the galaxy, these subtle adjustments can bring about a level of health and awareness that has been virtually forgotten. Greater refinement allows us to channel more light. This is the evolutionary path to enlightenment. I now understand there was no way for my teacher to answer my question, how do you do all of that? Living ceremony is a level of mastery words cannot encompass. We must go through the lengthy, initiatory refining process to shed who we are not in order to become one with all that is. Our guest this hour, Brigitte Mars, is an author, herbologist, and nutritional consultant of natural health with over 40 years of experience. She teaches herbal medicine at Naropa University and School of Health Mastery in Iceland. She's taught numerous institutions, including the Mayo Clinic. After this commercial break, I'll introduce Brigitte, and together we'll explore the modern application of herbology and healing with foods. So don't go away. This is The Science of Magic, www.thescienceofmagic.net.
That was beautiful.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is herbalist and nutritional consultant Brigitte Mars. She's the author of many fine books on natural health, including The Home Reference to Holistic Health and Healing. Brigitte's website is www.brigittemars.com. Brigitte, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
It is my pleasure, Gwilda. Thank you.
You bet. I think we're going to have fun today.
I'm ready.
All right. Brigitte, what drew you to working with natural medicine?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in the 50s, and I did not like getting shots, and I was on antibiotics almost all the time. But then I had this French-Canadian grandmother, and when I would go visit her, it would be like going back in time. And I remember one time we found a little wounded bird in the woods, and we picked it up and we brought it home and we fed it some herbs and put salve on it, and a few days later it was ready to fly away, and I thought, I want to be able to do that. Also, my grandmother's idea of ice cream was to put maple syrup, which we made, on snow, and there was just this beautiful connection with nature, and it sent that this is medicine for the people. And my parents would always be a little perplexed, like, why do you want to follow those old wives' tales? That's something that poor people did before the turn of the century. And I think that as a culture, we got so into doing what was new and modern and proving ourselves all American that we lost this amazing tradition. And somehow I knew in the core of my being that this is good for the people and it's good for the planet. And a lot of those old wives' tales were really right. They were based on thousands of years of observation by millions of people.
It's amazing, isn't it, how it's been handed down, through our generations from the old ones that kept the information.
Absolutely. And of course there was a great, persecution of it because, there was the church felt very threatened by women practicing midwifery and herbalism, and that only, men could be taught to read. And so I think a lot of the information was really lost, and people were fearful to talk about plant medicine. But it always felt right to me.
I'm with you there. So what's the science behind herbology?
Well, we know that since the beginning of time, people have been using plants, and we could say that plants grow from the earth. They transform the nutrients in the earth, such as calcium or iron or whatever it is. So they provide a really easy way to transform those nutrients that our bodies can use. But if we knew nothing more about the chemistry of plants, we could say that most plants that we use for healing are high in chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is like the blood of plants. It's this green essence. And there's only one atom of difference between chlorophyll and hemoglobin, which makes our blood red. They're identical. The only difference is that at the center of molecule of chlorophyll is an atom of magnesium, and at the center of a molecule of hemoglobin is an atom of iron. And so chlorophyll alone, we could say it helps the body better utilize oxygen. It helps to prevent infection. It helps to speed wound healing, and it's very nourishing and building to our blood. But we could also look at plant medicine is that they contain all kinds of things, alkaloids and essential oils. Most essential oils are antimicrobial. A lot of the alkaloids are very antimicrobial. And so medicine, in its quest for turning plants into medicine, has often looked at like one active ingredient. Like, we need to remove, one example is coca leaves are very high in protein and calcium and minerals. But when coca leaves started being shipped to Europe, they looked for one alkaloid, cocaine. And rather than being nourishing, it became a nightmare because it was very addicting and didn't have the natural components that would make it nourishing and less likely to be addictive. So I think that it's almost like humans have thought that they could dominate nature, but if we look at plants as being a symphony, not just one active ingredient, they contain the things that balance it, that make it safe and make it whole. And just by extracting one ingredient, you might be missing out on a nutrient that helps it to be more effective and helps to prevent side effects.
That's another thing I'd like to talk about is when you remove, it seems like they've distilled most of our drugs out of the original plant kingdom and then started synthesizing. But in its natural form, with all the constituents present, it holds a balance and has fewer side effects. Have you seen that?
Definitely fewer side effects. So we also can look at, there's this saying that doctors sometimes say, well, herbs haven't been properly tested. And I like to say they've been tested by millions of people for thousands of years. And, we can take time out and sip a cup of herbal tea. We know that when we're ill, we usually need to drink more liquids. And so drinking liquids that are infused with herbal medicine, when we even drink the liquids, we're smelling the herbs, and that immediately goes to our brain and has an effect. So when we're sipping a cup of, chamomile tea or rosemary tea or something, we could really be saying to ourselves, I'm nourishing my nervous system, or I'm strengthening my immune system, whatever the herb might be. So it seems that when we remove something from the whole plant, we're missing out on the wisdom of nature. And so you're so correct, Gwilda, in saying that, many of our pharmaceuticals do come from plants. Aspirin was discovered in meadowsweet and willow and aspen trees, and people have been using herbs that are rich in salicin for thousands of years. But when they just remove one alkaloid from it, then you're more likely to get side effects. Like taking aspirin every day might also thin your blood and make you more prone to stomach or intestinal ulcerations. So a plant is not the same as a pharmaceutical. And, the dandelions are as effective as one of the leading diuretics. And if you take chemical diuretics, it can deplete the body of potassium. And who's going to do a study on dandelions being a great diuretic? Because you can't patent a plant. So pharmaceutical companies are looking for a way that they can own a patent on a part of a plant or a synthetic version of the plant, because then you can make money. They're not going to research something that you could go dig up in your backyard.
Got to love big pharma, huh? So how do you think we figured out originally what does what? Where do we get that information?
Well, we know that very often, I love that you were speaking about shamanism, because very often the spiritual leader in a community was often also the healer. The two went side by side. So we know that shamans maybe observed the animals, and one animal that was particularly good to observe was the bear. So I love that you mentioned bear medicine. Osha is one of my favorite herbs. Which grows here in Colorado. So they might observe an animal and see what do the animals do. And because bears are omnivorous, much like humans, that seemed to be a good animal to observe. They also would maybe spend time in prayer, dream time, meditation, of course, trial and error. But we also know that shamans often use plants that would help to open the doors of perception and give one access to the realms of the unseen. And in different countries and cultures, those might be different plants, but it could have been psilocybin mushroom, or Amanita muscaria mushroom, or peyote. But there's also a really amazing theory called the doctrine of signatures, and I love this theory. I didn't talk about it for many years because I didn't see it as scientific. And so I was a little hesitant to mention it. But the doctrine of signatures is a very ancient philosophy that ascribes that plants often tell us what they're good for by the way they look and by the way they grow. So, for example, you could look at a plant like seaweed, and seaweed is said to be really good for the hair, and seaweed kind of looks like hair. Blueberries are good for the eyes, and during World War I, Air Force pilots were given rations of blueberry jam to help strengthen their vision. And blueberries, by the way, are good for brown and green eyes as well as blue eyes. Cauliflower, good for the brain. Coconut, good for the brain. Walnuts are good for the brain. They all, have a hard shell and, this matter that's high in fat and protein. So you could look at the plants, and they might tell you. The flavors alone tell you something. So, for example, pungent herbs are often good for the lungs, and we know this, and it has been proven, but if you're congested and you eat something very pungent like cayenne or ginger or horseradish, it clears your sinuses. So the flavors of the plants, the colors of the plants tell us something else. One of my daughters was telling me that her yoga teacher said she needed to be more grounded. And she asked, how do I get more grounded? And I said, eat more roots. They grow deep in the ground. It'll help you to be grounded. And beet juice, is it a myth that beets and beet juice and borscht, which is a beet soup, build the blood? No, beets are high in iron. So I've come to really, after years of studying botany and flower essences and homeopathy and just the general structure of plants, think that there really is something to the doctrine of signatures. I mean, the animals and the insects seem to know this, and it is a language of the plants that we can learn to read.
There's a vibrational language of the plants too, isn't there? I know there was years ago an amazing cancer cure that was developed by a farmer because he watched his horse he put out to pasture to die because it had cancer, and the horse started grazing on particular herbs and actually cured itself from cancer. Have you heard of that study or that form?
Yes, then that led to the Hoxsey formula.
Yes.
And at one time there were 17 cancer clinics based on these herbs that Hoxsey had seen his horse eat, which he had afterwards given to other animals and then to people. And when Hoxsey wouldn't sell his formula, because he had promised his grandfather people could get it for free, all those clinics were shut down. But the Hoxsey formula continues to live on, and I personally know people who were given 6 months to live, and 20 years later, they're still on the planet. So, it's almost like we're not giving credit how nature is so wise. And so, yes, observing the animals is but one way. And of course, we are different, but we also have a lot of similarities to our animal brethren.
Sometimes they're smarter than we are. In fact, most times I'd have to say. We're going to have to take a little commercial break. Brigitte and I will return to our discussion after this short break. We're coming to you through the land of leading-edge paranormal broadcasting, the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't miss the other fine shows and hosts on www.xzbn.net. You're listening to The Science of Magic, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Brigitte and I will be back, so don't you go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest is ours herbalist and nutritional consultant, Brigitte Mars. Brigitte, no, I don't think that an herbalist and a shaman can get together, but what we don't have to talk about hallucinogens. What can you tell me about hallucinogens?
Well, I like to use the word entheogens because, hallucination is something that's not really there. And I do think that there are plants that our planet is blessed with that have, as I said earlier, opened the doors of perception. That's a quote from William Blake. That's where the band The Doors got their name, by the way. There are plants that have traditionally been used, and I'm not talking about, party substances. I'm talking about things that have been used with prayer and intention in a safe setting to gain access to the spirit realm. And they might be used for healing or for divination or finding lost objects, or even to bring about harmony and resolve disagreements in a tribal situation. So, it is interesting because our planet abounds with compounds that are psychedelic. And even our bodies contain compounds that are consciousness-altering. Dimethyltryptamine is something produced by our pineal gland that comes in when we're born and when we die and when we give birth. So, again, I like to trust in the wisdom of nature, and I think that there are substances, again, like psilocybin mushrooms or peyote or ayahuasca, that have long been used by peoples and can be very healing and give amazing insight to the realms that are often unseen. And I really think that we need sort of a new form of education about this, because for so long there's been this, just say no, and yet young people often want to try things that alter their consciousness. And I think we need to educate people on just say how and also realize that it's not something that may be appropriate for everybody. In many tribal cultures, it might have only been the shaman who did these things, or just the women, or just the men, or just the elders. So there's certainly, creating safe set and setting and having an intention. And I think that many people, when they, take these things and just go to a headbanger concert with 10,000 people, they miss out on the opportunity of spiritual potential and growth and even, consciousness opening. So I think they're powerful plants, and if we weren't supposed to have them, why would our bodies make them, and why would they abound? I mean, the state of Illinois is covered with a plant that contains dimethyltryptamine, a phalaris. It's also known as canary reed grass, and there's mushrooms that crop out of the earth, so that are psychoactive and have long been used. So I think that it almost seems like there's an interest in keeping people unaware, keeping them dummied down, and I do think that these plants have great power to open the doors and help us to see what really is. And but I do think creating safe set and setting and being with people you know and trust, because we've all heard of people who've had difficult or dangerous experiences. Yeah, so they're not for everyday use, and nor should they just be used recreationally without any thought or intention or prayer, really.
Yeah, that always scares me, because what these different substances do is literally open up the awareness or the consciousness, and then you go expose that like a new baby to a violent environment, like where a lot of people are playing hardcore music and a lot of unbalanced, unprocessed emotion flying around the room. That just seems diametrically opposed to me.
Absolutely, or that no one said no, you shouldn't drink alcohol with your psilocybin. I mean, so I think there's a lot of education, and one of the classes I do teach at Naropa, I teach herbal medicine there, but I do a class which they asked me to teach on how to use psychoactive substances in a safe setting. And it's not to encourage people to do it, it's really just to prevent harm, because there is really no guidance. And again, I also give a lot of cautions, like, no, this is not a substitute for therapy or working on yourself or getting counseling with your partner, or so it's all part of life. And I think in the state of Colorado, where we've legalized cannabis, and now there's so much information coming out about that it can help seizures and cancer and so forth. And I think that these other plants have the potential for great healing. I'm a member of a group called MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and there is a lot of bona fide studies going on the planet, how some of these substances are so much more helpful than any drug in treating things like post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole world that we're just starting to explore, but I will say that MAPS has been publishing research for several decades now.
Yes, that's really good to know, because it's a huge subject that we either avoid or go into party time with, and neither one's appropriate. So as an herbalist, how do you know when a person needs traditional medicine before they can benefit from herbal treatments?
Well, Gwilda, I like to say that herbalism is the traditional medicine.
Well, let's say allopathic.
Yeah. So, I like to follow an approach which I learned from my friend Susan Weed, and it's called the wise woman approach. So, and it's appropriate for men as well. So when you have an illness, the first thing you should do is ask yourself, what is this trying to tell me? Is it telling you I've been staying up too late, I'm eating too much sugar, I'm drinking too much caffeine? What is this trying to tell me? And then we might look at what can we do energetically. Maybe we need to heal a relationship. Maybe we need to clean our house. Maybe we need to be more organized. Maybe we need to go to bed earlier. And then we should look at what can we do with food. Well, maybe I should drink less coffee. Maybe I should eat more sweet potatoes or have a salad every day. Maybe I should switch to better quality oils. And then herbs. And then we have vitamins, which are accessible. You can buy them in a health food store. You don't need prescription. But I'm not as keen on vitamins as I am on herbs. and then we have drugs, and then we have surgery. So it's not that any of these things are wrong. It's just that ideally, most people, when they have an illness, they start out with the drugs. But there might have been 4 or 5 other things that they could have taken responsibility for that would have brought about long-term improvement in their health, balance in their body, rather than just suppressing the symptom.
And that's pretty much what our drugs do, isn't it, is suppress symptoms.
And, let's say you take a drug and, I don't have migraines any longer, but you're still eating the foods that are causing the migraines, and your body might find another way to get your attention to say, I don't like this. So we really should pay attention and not see illness as the enemy, but really an opportunity.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. It's messages coming from the body when things are going awry, yes?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see herbology as relating to magic? We talked a little bit about it.
Well, this is originally one of my interests in herbalism was in magic. And so I think the real magic is in our intention, but we could look at, plants have long been corresponded to different signs of the zodiac. So, for example, what sign are you, Gwilda?
I'm a Scorpio.
A Scorpio, so am I. Okay, so Scorpio's ruled by Mars. So plants that are associated with Mars often have sort of that warrior element. They maybe have stingers like thistles or stinging nettles. They might also have the color red, like raspberries got prickles and red berries. And it's really good for the reproductive system. But certainly people have long used color, herbs, crystals for helping to put intention and the physical realm together. So, it's certainly an ancient tradition, and I think that the plants are really magical, and they are an opportunity for us to take responsibility for our health. Someone emailed me the other day and said, "Can you cure me of tinnitus?" And I wrote back and said, "I don't claim to cure people. I teach people to cure themselves." Mm-hmm. So, that right there, I don't claim that I can just cure you, but I can tell you what you might eat and what you might not eat, and what some herbs and acupressure points and essential oils and things like that you might do. So, I think that using herbs and having intention, so we could look at the colors of the plants. So let's take another zodiac sign, like plants of Leo often look like the sun, the sunflower, the dandelion, calendula, marigold. And Leo is said to govern the heart, the spine, and the eyes. So the association between astrology and herbalism goes back to ancient, Babylon. So I love that. And we could also look at what element is a plant associated with. So obviously plants that grow near the water and maybe have white or yellow flowers like lotus or lily or watercress might have an association with the moon. And, Cancer is a sign that is governed by the moon, and Cancer governs the stomach and the breasts. So we could look at every part of the body corresponds to a zodiac sign where it could be your strength or it could be your weakness. Scorpio, by the way, governs the genitals. Could be our strength, could be our weakness, but...
Absolutely, it could. So it sounds to me like what we're working with here is frequency. So we see frequency in color, we see frequency in shape, we see frequency in illness as imbalanced frequency, and frequency in health as in balanced frequency. So is that what we're looking at, is a frequency correction with herbs?
A frequency, and we could also look at the aroma is also part of that too. So, the smell of a plant, the flavor of a plant, that's also going to tell you about where in the body it goes. And, we can call it magic and we can call it science because, I think that a Western practitioner might say, well, that's not founded on science, but I'll tell you the Asian philosophy of 5-element theory, and that plants that are pungent are said to be good for our lungs, and we know that pungent plants have a lot of essential oils in them, which we now know are antimicrobial. Sweet plants and I don't mean sugar, I mean things like sweet potatoes and winter squash. The sweet flavor has a special affinity for the stomach and spleen. The bitter flavor means there's alkaloids present, and that might have a special affinity for the heart and the small intestines. And then the salty flavor might be directed more towards the kidneys and the bladder. So I think of seaweed. So the flavors also are part of that frequency. So the color, the aroma, I love it. It's so beautiful. It's so organized.
Yeah, it's amazing, and then we thought we could improve on it, right?
Really?
Yeah, vain much. We're going to have to take another commercial break. Brigitte and I will be back shortly. We're coming to you on the leader in paranormal, spirituality, and alternative health broadcasting, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. You're listening to The Science of Magic, www.thescienceofmagic.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. We will be back, so don't go away. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka, and our guest this hour is one of those gifted people of service, Brigitte Mars, the author of many fine books on natural health, including The Home Reference to Holistic Health and Healing. Brigitte, let's talk about food a little bit. What have they done to our food?
Well, I'll tell you, you think by the year 2000 we would know what we're supposed to eat, because every 6 months there's a new philosophy. I mean, we have seen it like fat-free and paleo and go vegan and soy is the greatest thing on earth. Oh, watch out for soy. It's phytoestrogenic. But certainly some things stand the test of time. And, I think it is really important to look at eating more organically. We know that's good for the planet. We know that our liver doesn't need the stress of processing pesticides. We know that pesticides are poisoning our bee population, and they are contaminating our waters. And even if you think you're only spraying your yard, it all ends up going into the air, into the water. So we are all connected. So I've done many, many different diets. And I can share a little bit about what I find works for me. I like to say I'm high raw, mostly vegan, sometimes flexible. So, I love eating raw food. When we're done with our call, I'm going to go have a bowl of soaked chia seeds with walnuts and apples and bee pollen and for breakfast. So I am a big believer in eating a wide variety of colors. And one of the ways I check in with my grandchildren is they call me up at night and they say, "Grand-mère, I had red and yellow and blue today." And I'll say, "Remember to have some green tomorrow." So eat a wide variety of colors. I think the American diet has gotten rather beige. And so, how colorful can you make your plate? Kale salad, black beans, purple cabbage, orange acorn squash, for example. Now that is a colorful meal. And we could also think about eating a wide variety of flavors. So using more condiments in our food, like ginger and garlic and cinnamon and oregano. All of those have their own antimicrobial properties. And in the ancient world, using culinary spices was a way of preserving the food. So when people didn't have refrigeration, and of course many people on the planet still don't, it has been imperative to use cayenne and ginger and oregano and thyme to help slow down the deterioration of food and make it safer to eat and less likely to harbor parasites. I do find a lot of people I work with, they do better when they go off gluten. And gluten, it's kind of like glue. Gluten is like glue, and what we do with gluten is make pasta and pastry, which is kind of like paste. But, a couple hundred years ago, bread was the staff of life. So what happened? What changed? So we know that grains used to be freshly milled. They were hand harvested. Now things have been hybridized. We're using chemicals like bromine to process our grain. And, another thing is people used to be considered wealthy if they had, a couple of cows in the backyard. And now many people are finding if they go off of dairy products that their sinus congestion clears up or their intestines get better. So what happened? Well, the milk got pasteurized. It got homogenized. So a lot of the things that we've done to increase the shelf life of our food has also been part of the demise of our food. So if we look at, what did people eat traditionally? They ate seasonally. They ate more locally. They grew a lot of their own food. And one of my big things is I eat a lot of wild food. So I love to go out and collect things. Last night I blended up stinging nettle with avocado and apples and made what I called a fruit whip. And the nettles were growing like 2 minutes before I was eating them, and the apples were harvested in a tree from a tree on my block. And so to eat food that is that fresh really gives you a kind of superpower, I think. I love the energetics of that. But I don't eat all raw. I love to eat black rice. So again, forget white rice or even like brown rice. Go for black rice or wild rice, because the color black means there's a lot of minerals present.
Before we run out of time, Brigitte, I'd love to have you tell our listeners where they can find your books and your services.
Thank you so much. Well, BrigitteMars.com. It's a French name, so it helps to spell it right. BRIGITTE Mars, MARS, like the planet. Goes well with being a Scorpio, doesn't it? So BrigitteMars.com. You can find all my books. They're on Amazon. But, we also need to support our local natural food stores and our local bookstores, or we're only going to have one place to shop in the future. And I like having stores to go into and peruse. And you can order them off of my website. And I also have a private practice. I do phone and Skype consults and private consults with people all over the world. So I am accessible, and I've written 13 books.
Yeah, you've been very prolific, and I love your work. I love your work. So thanks for providing it for a world very much in need. So, how about fermented food? We hear a lot about fermented food right now, and I think all of us have digestion problems, like you mentioned earlier, the overuse of antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What can you tell us about fermenting?
Well, most traditional cultures, and especially those known for long life, have eaten some sort of traditional food. So right now I'm making sauerkraut. And I think this is a great way to strengthen your immune system as we move into the cold and flu time. And it's so easy. I mean, it's cabbage and salt and a little pickle press. I bought online a Japanese pickle press. And it's so easy. And I try to always have a batch of sauerkraut going on. So even though I just dissed dairy products, of all the dairy products, yogurt is a fermented form of dairy. And so even though it's pasteurized and homogenized, it's been brought back to life. So think about the word probiotic means for life, as opposed to an antibiotic, which is against life. Other forms of fermented food are kimchi, miso. But again, a lot of miso and a lot of sauerkraut that are sold in stores are still pasteurized. So you want to look for those foods in the refrigerated case and they should say unpasteurized or with active cultures. There's even yogurts out there that are not really made the traditional way with active cultures. They're thickened with gelatin, so it looks like yogurt, but it doesn't have any probiotics in it. So fermented foods, kefir would be another one. I'm trying to think sourdough bread, but then you have to bake sourdough bread, so the active cultures are not really alive there. But a lot of people find that sourdough bread is easier for them to digest. So a wonderful book is Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, and it talks a lot about, how did our ancestors eat, and before the age of processed food. And one way of preserving food was to ferment it. So if you had, 20 heads of cabbage harvested from your garden, making it into a ferment was a way of keeping it through the winter.
It's amazing, though, isn't it? The closer we can go back to the way our food was before modern man got their grubby little hands on it, the healthier we're going to be. And the more we can create things. I cook pretty much everything from scratch for just that reason, and there's just a lot of joy in growing something and being one with nature and re-entering the circle of life by eating live things, don't you think?
Absolutely. And food is so important, and we know that it affects not only our physical body but our mental body as well. So how many people are being medicated for attention deficit or depression? So if we look at the wisdom of Asian medicine, they would say that very often depression is a liver-centered condition, and that maybe we need to include a little bit more sour food in our diet. Use some sauerkraut, for example, or yogurt, or drink lemon and water, or use unpasteurized apple cider vinegar. And so I do find that I think many people are eating foods that they're allergic to. We often become addicted to what we're allergic to, and we know that allergens can cause inflammation in our sinuses, in our joints, for example, in our skin, causing conditions like eczema and acne, but it can also cause brain inflammation and make us feel depressed, anxious, paranoid, obsessive-compulsive. So my latest book that you mentioned, The Home Reference to Holistic Health and Healing, is all about natural remedies for the mental and emotional body, grief, depression, fear, anxiety, and how can we enhance our intelligence. So, another simple thing that kind of has gone by the wayside when we think about the wisdom of our ancestors is people used to do more things with their hands. In my grandmother's day, the women and the men, when they got together, they were whittling or sewing or crocheting or doing some kind of woodwork or metalwork. And now, people are just like holding on to the remote control or something, or we're not using our hands in an intelligent way. And if we want our brains to serve us our whole life long, there's a lot of intelligence enhancing that can come from knit one, purl two.
You got it. Well, time flies and we're out of it. Thank you so much, Brigitte, for being on The Science of Magic.
Thank you. Many, many blessings.
Blessings to you, my friend. Our guest this hour has been herbalist and nutritional consultant Brigitte Mars. She's the author of many fine books on natural health, including The Home Reference to Holistic Health and Healing. Her website, www.brigittemars.com. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to fast, thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and supported by the gifts of the earth.